Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Another food prep planning preserving video to come. I did want to mention before I get into all the food that I keep on forgetting to mention that I burnt my hand, and people have been commenting on it in the comments on the videos because I keep on forgetting to mention it. So the new oven that we got, the doors get hot. So the handles and the doors stay cold, but everything else gets really, really hot. So it's been a bit of a learning curve to remember not to touch the doors with my hands at all. And I managed to burn myself quite badly on the back of the hand, sort of like nudging a door closed. And it shows up throughout these videos. Gets worse at one point. I managed to maintain the blister for ages and it was healing up really nicely. And then I knocked it and the blister got knocked off and it looked really bad for a few days. And then it got better again. And now it's just about gone. But it did look pretty horrible for a little while there throughout these videos, and I've had a couple of comments about it, so I just wanted to address that and make sure that that was said. There was something else that I was going to say at the beginning of the video before I got into all the food, and I can't remember what it was. I should have made notes. Like, I've got notes for the video, but I didn't put notes for what I needed to say before I got into the food prep. But anyway, so we're up to whatever part, we've decided to scrap the whole parts thing. So we're up to wherever we are in the food prep planning and preservation for the July-August month. I have a hamper coming this Saturday, so I'll probably do like a week, like a what we eat in a week meals from the hamper on for the next week. And then I go for groceries or the supply run or whatever in the... So I was supposed to go like the 28th, 29th, 30th, and I'm actually going to be going the 27th, 28th, 29th, I think, because Darryl has a church thing that he needs to go to Brisbane for on the weekend, so I need to be back before that so that he can go to that. So Mum has managed to juggle her things around a little bit so that she's gonna take Thursday off instead of Friday off for me so that she can come shopping with me, because if we take the trailer, that's the issue. Now, we haven't got the car sorted yet, so we're still... don't know what's happening there. We've just spoken to the mechanic that got fixed at last time. They told us that they were going to have to hold the car for a few weeks to fix this gasket that's an issue, and we can't do that. So we've spoken to them to see what some workarounds might be. We have a friend who we can discuss some options with, but we just haven't had a chance to really discuss those options yet, and I'm not real sure what's happening. So we will see how we go. We're still haven't done anything in the way of repairs, and we just don't really know how urgent those repairs are, or whether it was just the battery that was the thing that sort of tipped it over the edge at this particular point, and maybe the other stuff that's going wrong has been going wrong this whole time and it's not as urgent. Obviously it still needs to be fixed because we can't not have a car, but I don't know how. Yeah, so if we can, but see, I have to drive to Brisbane for that shopping run, and the size of the runs that we're doing now, I definitely need to take the trailer, and then Darryl has to go to Brisbane for the church thing as well. So that's 2 trips to and from Brisbane all in 1 week, which if the car's not healthy is not great. So I don't know what we're doing yet. I'll keep you as updated as we go, but we will figure it out as we go along. But for the moment, this is a standard food video like all my others. Now, I do have a sponsored bit in this one, so when I get to it I'll explain it, but TeeMars sourdough jars and tools, they sent me some stuff, so I will go over that as I show it. So I was grateful for that, and yeah, let's get into it and I will see you guys at the end. So I should have put this at the end of the other video and I didn't. This is what the chicken loaf looks like out of the jars the next day and being sliced. It worked perfectly. I did end up doing, so I did, the stainless steel container is a kilo's worth and the jars 750 grams worth. Now, we can go through a fair bit of chicken loaf and that if we've got fresh bread and wraps and that we're eating it with, but the problem here was that it was in amongst a lot of other meals. So in the end I ended up vacuum sealing and freezing a bunch of the excess chicken loaf, and it isn't defrosting very nicely. As it defrosts, it goes a little bit crumbly, even vacuum sealed up. So we're going to have to decide what we do there, whether it's not something that we do in more than we can eat in a couple of days, sort of a time period, or if there needs to be some sort of other emulsifier in there, a bit more oil or something into the meat to make it hold better once it's frozen and defrosted. We're going to have to work on that. Or we just chalk it up as it's a once-off every now and again, fancy kind of a thing to do, have homemade chicken loaf, and the rest of the time we don't make it. So we'll see how we go. But in the jar, it worked perfectly in the jar, so at least I know that I can use the jars for this. I decided that we were going to have pizza for dinner that night, so I wanted to make up a cheese for the pizza. So I decided to make up one of my gradable solid style cheeses rather than doing one of the pourable cheeses, just as a, you know, something a bit different. Now, I get asked about my cheese sauces a lot on the comments, and I try and respond. There's 3 or 4 variations that I make depending on use. I will try and do a video about all of them. I might, you know, make an effort to make all of them and share and compare them for people to see, because I have like a white cheese sauce that I use for like my cauliflower cheeses and things like that, and then I have sort of a stretchy cheese that I use for pizzas and nachos and things like that. I got this sort of a solid cheese that I use to slice and grate. There's a few different versions of them, and obviously they're all dairy free, so there's, when I get asked about cheese sauces, I have to go back over my notebook and sort of clarify which ones I'm, you know, the ones that I prefer, and then share them that way. But maybe I need to do a video on all of them at once so that people can see the differences. I don't know. So I wanted to do a solid, sort of a gradable one for the pizzas. I do it gelatin based because I'm not vegan, we're just dairy free, so I use gelatin. I know that there's a lot out there that use agar-agar though, but I use gelatin. I don't like full cashew cheeses, I don't like the texture of them. So I want a bit of cashew in there for like texture and consistency, but I like to use coconut cream as my base. And you tend to find that most have cashews and water or that sort of thing. They don't use the both together, but I really like the flavour of them both together. So I used the Thermomix so I could do it all in one bowl. So I want to bloom the gelatin, so I warm the liquid in the Thermomix first, which is a tin of coconut cream, and I like all my recipes to use a tin so that I don't have to have partial tins anywhere. So I use a whole 400-gram tin of coconut cream, and then I warmed that up in the Thermomix, and then I added the gelatin and kept that warming so that the gelatin bloomed in the coconut cream. Now, then I added in some cashews, some nutritional yeast, some lemon juice, a bit of tahini, some smoked paprika, onion, salt and garlic. You could use miso instead of tahini for a similar sort of a thing. Slightly different flavour profile, but a similar sort of an added texture and depth of flavour, I suppose. I stuck it all in and just let the Thermomix deal with it. Now that's the benefit of using the Thermomix though, is that you don't have to soak your cashews or anything like that, because the Thermomix is powerful enough to do it. So Vitamixes, I think, are the blenders that do something similar. A lot of vegans who make a lot of cheeses and stuff in Vitamixes, but the Thermomix works really well for this, and I like the fact that I could heat it and bloom the gelatin in there first. So basically I just stick it all in the Thermomix and then I just blend it, scrape down the sides, reblend it, scrape down the sides, reblend it, and get it to the texture that I want. You want it really nice and smooth. Now, I want to set this in something that should theoretically be easy to remove it from. Ideally something with a loose base, like a loose based cheese, spring-loaded cake tin type thing, or something like that would be ideal. But I didn't have one of them handy in a small size, though you can buy them in little individual sizes, and maybe that's something I need to do, and then I can set a couple of these little blocks up in those sort of thing. But anyway, so I just used a Pyrex bowl. Now theoretically this should be easy enough to get things out of. It's wider at the top, narrower in the bottom, but you know, we'll see. So I lightly sprayed it with oil, put the cheese in it, and then I covered it with cling wrap, but making the cling wrap touch the surface of the cheese like you do with a custard, to stop it getting a skin on it, but also to stop that condensation from dripping on it and creating funny textures and colour differences in the surface of the cheese. Though that's going to be the bottom when you pull it out anyway, but it's still, you know, something that I do. And then stuck that in the fridge. Now this takes however long it takes to set. It's fairly variable. It's not particularly hot. It's only warm when you've only like warmed the coconut cream. You haven't heated it, so it doesn't take too long. But the longer it sits in the fridge, the firmer it's going to sit up, because gelatin and all that. So that went in the fridge to wait for dinner. Now this is the TeeMars sourdough supplies that I got gifted. So TeeMars contacted me a while back and I actually declined because I just wasn't going to be able to use what they were offering effectively to show it off, but also because I just wasn't using that kind of thing at the time, and it was pointless to try and show something off that I wasn't going to continuously use. Anything that I take on gifted is something that I want to be able to use through multiple videos and show you how I'm using it, and I don't want it something that I show once and it goes in a cupboard. It needs to be something that I use constantly. So I was having trouble with my sourdough starter now that the weather is starting to warm up but is still cold, and then I was trying to sort out the whole proofing box and everything else, and I was having a whole lot of problems. So I contacted them and said if it's still on offer, I'd be interested now. So they sent it out to me, which was really good, and I got this kit. So I opened it on camera on purpose just so I could show it off. It comes with a little book of recipes and some instructions on care and use of the products. There's a couple of silicone bannetons in the package, which I'm keen to try. Being that I don't use the cane ones here because I always struggle with mold and stuff because of the humidity and the outdoor kitchen and all the rest of it, I tend to use plastic colanders, which works fine, but these silicone bannetons will give me that ring look that the cane ones give me that the colanders don't, so it'd be really kind of neat. There's a few new scrapers, some plastic ones of different shapes. You can never have enough of these. I always struggle to find these when I'm looking for them, so having more of them is great. There's a lame and some blades. Now, I've never really been successful with these style of lame, but I will give it another go with scoring the bread once I'm getting to that point. A silicone spatula with the metal internal piece, a really nice long straight one. It's a great shape for stirring the starter in the jar, and again something you can never have, and more than, like, you never have too many of those ones. The main item being the jar for the starter to live in, but also a metal dough scraper divider type thing and a silicone brush. Now the jar is the main thing I'm most keen on here. It is a standard sort of a wide mouth jar, but it has measurements marked up the side, and it comes with 2 stick-on temperature guides, which will be amazing to try and assess how well my proofer is actually working to keep the starter warm. Both have Celsius and Fahrenheit on them. One is primary on each, like one is primary Celsius with Fahrenheit down the side, one's primary Fahrenheit with Celsius down the side. Either way works. And I'll be using both of them because I'll put one on each jar so that I can wash a jar and have one air drying while I use the other jar, sort of thing. And it also has an elastic band that has times on it, so you can track your feeding times by turning that to the line on the jar and tracking that time, but also track the height of the starter in the jar to see when it doubles too. And this is great because normally I just use an elastic band or a piece of ribbon or something, and so having this specific thing for it is neat. I cleaned the jar with a little vinegar before sticking the temperature gauge on to make sure it stays. And it came with a little elasticized canvas lid topper for the jar as well, which would be great to keep out any bugs in summer. I do put a Fowler's jar over the top of that. It doesn't fit firmly, so it still breathes, but it stops the top of the starter getting a skin because the canvas lets the tops dry out a little bit too much. So I do put the Fowler's jar on top of that as well. So that's the little kit that I got from TeeMars. Thank you very much, and I'm going to show you how I used it throughout the next multiple videos trying to get this sourdough starter working again. So I pulled my starter out of the fridge, which is very neglected, and put some into the bottom of the new jar before feeding it. Mixed and scraped the jar and then put the lid on and put it in the proofer to see what temperature the jar gets to, and then I can assess how well it's working. I got it in the proofer with the dough ahead made. I used a pot of boiling water to boost the temperature in the proofer environment as well, and then let it go. Once that big container of dough that you saw in the proofer that I had mixed up earlier had doubled, I pulled it out. This was the pizza dough for dinner, just a standard version of my yeasted pizza dough, same day dough sort of thing. I divided it into 8 balls, coated them with semolina and put them in a container until we're ready to use them for dinner. Now, my pizza peel got broken recently and I'm just using what I have, somewhat successfully and somewhat not. I need to order another one. But I just made the pizza like usual, stretched it out on a surface. An upturned cookie sheet was what I was trying at this particular time. It didn't work fantastically well. And I topped it. So I used homemade pizza sauce. We have caramelized onion jam, some bacon, some corn, pineapple, salami, and some of the shredded chicken from the other day. The tenderloins that I roasted and then shredded in the Thermomix. So we use a variety of toppings, but that's leftovers is what we use a lot for on top of pizzas. We also have marinated mushrooms and anchovies on offer for children and Darryl who wants those, and things like that too. I also got the cheese out of the mold. It was a little bit more difficult than I would have liked, but it worked. My intent had been to hand grate it, but of course nobody could find my box grater. I rarely use it, but I do have it for this kind of thing, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So I couldn't grate it, so instead I just sliced up and placed it. It's not quite the same effect, but it'll still taste good. It's just going to melt. It doesn't puddle as well as standard cheese. It does melt and puddle a little bit, but not excessively. So when you grate it and you spread the little shreds all over the top of the pizza, it's much more effective than having pieces of it, but it's still going to work and it's still going to taste good. I don't know that I filmed the pizzas finished. I should have a photo that I'll put in here of one of the pizzas cooked to show you how the cheese ended up cooking on the top of it as well. The next day I reassessed my proofer situation. So the larger proofer just wasn't pushing the temperature up long enough for the starter. It was fine for quick rise yeasted doughs that I was using warm water in, but the length of time I needed the starter to proof, it wasn't working. It just wasn't maintaining that temperature. I had bought myself a smaller version of the same container from Kmart, so I grabbed that out, and then I decided to try using the heat mat wrapping the jar rather than just from the bottom. So I used a couple of empty ghee jars to keep everything in that sort of curved shape that I was after, surrounding the starter jar but not touching it. I put a probe in the open space near where the jar was, curious to see what kind of temperatures the inside of the box would get to, as well as a bowl of boiling water. About 3 hours later, you can see that the thermometer on the jar is showing that the jar temperature is about 25, so that's looking pretty good. I'll keep on sharing my progress with the starter, getting started to work over however many videos, every video, but I think this jar and the thermometer will give me more control and knowledge to be able to get it successfully live again, and it's going to help in summer too, because I have problems with the starter getting too hot in summer, so this is going to give me a good comparison, a good show of what works and what doesn't with maintaining the starter. The next thing I had to work on was the last of the pork roasts. I still had a few to get through before they were at their best before. I had intended to make sausages this month but forgot to buy sausage casings. I think I mentioned that in one of the other videos. So I instead used them in other ways. First thing I did was I filled up a few trays with the small red potatoes to use up the rind like usual. I've been doing this regularly and freezing the potatoes as well as using them for meals, and they heat back up beautifully cooked in the lard the way they are. I make sure to coat them with the lard and put them in freezer bags, and then when I roast them I just tip them into a baking tray and put them in the oven, and they are just really, really nice done that way. Then I sliced and took off the rind from what I needed to cover the potatoes with the rind for baking. As I filled a tray, I would spray it with oil and sprinkle it with salt, and then get them into the oven. So I think I did 3 full trays of the potatoes with the rind in this particular batch, because I was going to freeze some, use some, but trying to use up that rind. We do have some rind in the freezer from previous porks that we haven't cooked it up straight away, and I don't want to end up with huge amounts of it in the freezer. Even though I can use it, it's inefficient to have that there. After that I started dicing up the pork in appropriate sizes to be able to run it through the mincer chute. I'm not particularly pedantic about it, just making sure that the pieces are appropriately sized for that chute to make it easy to do. Some of this pork I'm going to use to make sausage rolls, so I finally cut up some bacon as well while I had the board out and got that in a cast iron pan. Then I got Darryl to help me out with the mincing. My shoulder at this point was still really bad, so I was asking for help where I needed it, and doing something like this mincing was really quite difficult, especially after having cut all the pork up in the first place. He ran it all through the mincer for me. Again, I'm using my Louvel mincer, which I adore, and I mention it regularly because I'm really happy with the purchase and I highly recommend it. We used a fairly coarse grind because the pork is a nice soft meat and there's very little gristle or anything in this roast, so it works quite well. I grated up some zucchini really fine from the hamper to use in the sausage rolls and cooked that and some garlic off in the pan with the bacon, making sure that to evaporate as much liquid as possible because we don't want these sausage rolls to be soggy. We don't want them to send the pastry soggy. I also added a jar of my caramelized onion jam, which will also add some moisture, so we have to be aware of that, but add lots of flavour. I measured out some of the pork just so that I know approximately how much of each add-ins I need to add to it. Added a few eggs. I normally do around about around about an egg per, say, 750 grams of mince, a bunch of breadcrumbs from some leftover bread. I like to use panko style crumbs, so I want to use my own bread that is ground up into breadcrumbs, so it's got that really light fluffy texture, because you want it to absorb the liquid but you don't want it to make the sausage rolls heavy. So a really light crumb is nice, a panko style crumb, homemade bread, crumbed, that sort of thing. I added the bacon mix and then kneaded it through, trying not to overwork the meat, because if you overwork mince like this it will end up tough. And we also, the bacon and stuff is hot and we don't want to cook those eggs, so we're trying to blend the eggs and the bacon and the mince through, and keeping the temperature ambient rather than hot. So you just want to blend that through like that. You could of course let the bacon and stuff cool if you timed things correctly, but I didn't. Once that was done, I started rolling the sausage rolls. Now, I buy store-bought puff pastry. I buy it from Costco. It's the Borgs. It's dairy-free. It comes in like 12 sheets per pack or something like that, and it's fairly well priced. I can make rough puff pastry, but it is very time-consuming, and I don't find it worthwhile. It's not something that I find an efficient use of my time for this sort of a thing. It's different if I was making a pie or something and I just wanted a pie crust for a fancy looking pie, then yes, okay. But for sausage rolls, when I make them, I tend to make them in bulk, and so I use like 12-15 pieces of puff pastry, and it really would not be an efficient use of my time to do that, and they get eaten so quickly as well. So store-bought puff pastry, we cut it in half. A row of meat is added and it's rolled. Sonnet helped me with all of these this day, and she was great help, but there is some unevenly cut sausage rolls there, which is fine. It'll all taste the same. We did cut it into pieces and put it on the baking trays. You can cook it in whole like lengths of sausage roll and just score it, and I have done that plenty of times and probably have done it on this channel before, but it just takes a little bit longer to cook, and this was lunch as well. We're running late. I just wanted to get it done. But I also like those crispy bits at the ends of the sausage roll, and if you cut them into individual pieces, you get crispy bits, 2 crispy bits on the end of every sausage roll, which is kind of nice. Sonnet was egg washing them for me as we went and sprinkling with sesame seeds, and we just kept going, filling tray after tray after tray. I think I've got a photo here of how many I did, but it was a lot. This is what the potatoes and the rind look like when they're done. I had to pull those out of the oven to start baking the sausage rolls, so those 3 trays came out of the oven and then the sausage rolls went in. You can take these a little bit further. The rind on top can be made a little bit more crunchy, but we tend to just pick at the rind. We don't eat a whole lot of it. The dogs get it as treats. What we were looking to do was render the fat off the rind to cook the potatoes in, so that's what we've done. And then you can bump the temperature of the oven up to a bit of a blast to really give it a crispy top on those rinds if you really want. But I don't want to overcook the potatoes either, because the intent is to freeze a whole lot of these, and then if they're overcooked and then when you're reheating them, then they get even more overcooked. So they're better to be a little under than a little over. I checked on my starter at about 5 p.m. The temperature inside the box is sitting at around 19. There's visible bubbles in the starter, and the jar is sitting at about 25 degrees Celsius. And it's gained around about 1/3 of itself in height. So that's not bad at all, especially considering that this starter is from the fridge and had been sitting in the fridge neglected for weeks. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to attempt to feed it regularly, use the combination of the Proofer box and the TeeMars jar to assess how hot or not hot it's getting in that jar and make a call. And then I should be able to judge by how the temperature that the jar is sitting at. I should be able to judge how long it's going to take me. So I should be able to judge when I need to feed it to bake each time I want to bake. So in summer it doubles, triples so quickly. I make it in really big batches. I can bake just about any time. But in winter, there's that whole scheduling of getting it doubled, tripled enough to be healthy to use it, and that it takes so long for it to do that sometimes that by the time it's doubled, it's nighttime and it's wrong. So I'm hoping to be able to judge the timing by using that temperature gauge on the TeeMars jar along with the proofer and then assessing it that way. And this is what the sausage rolls look like. These are a favourite. They reheat really well too. I normally freeze them in like lunch portions, but I did discover this particular time that I baked them that the kids like them cold, which we've discussed, or I have discussed here before. Cold leftovers is kind of gross, but whatever. So there was a container in the fridge for a few days, and the kids just ate them as snacks out of the fridge cold for lunches and morning teas and things like that, and I didn't end up getting any in the freezer, which is fine. They were cooked to eat, and it just meant that there was less work for me for lunches for a few days there. So that was another couple of days of food in the kitchen. Now there was 4 or 3 pork roasts, and this was just getting through the first part of it. I was going to add on to this video with a bit more of it, but then it just would have run a bit longer, so I split it up. So that was the first, I think it was only like 3 kilos of mince, mind you, and each roast is around about the 7 kilo mark. They're about $50 each, and they're about $7 a kilo, so they're around about the 7 kilo mark each roast. So that wasn't even half of one of them. So there's some work on the pork in the next video, I think, because I didn't realize I had so many left in the fridge, and then realized that I was supposed to be making sausages and all that, so it meant that I got to them a bit late and had more than I expected there all at once to get done, and I got through it, but we'll see some more of that in the next videos. And then we've still got the beef trim to sort out as well. That needed to be worked on too, so we're still working through the food and getting it all sorted for this period. Before then, I will have to start the whole process again, inventorying for the next supply run and figuring out what we used and what we didn't use, and what's still sitting in the freezer, and what I bought too much of, not enough, all that sort of thing, which I'll go through with you guys again before I do that shop. So this is another 9-week period, and then I think I've got 2 8-week periods before Christmas, and then we will reassess our timelines again post-Christmas and see how we go. Now the big thing though with changing timelines over summer is that summer's when a lot of the fruit's really in season, and if I don't go often enough over summer, I miss out on some of that fruit because it's only in season for a shorter period of time. So sometimes I find that I get to the end, like I don't think I got any strawberries at all last year, and they come in from now through to Christmas, generally speaking. I think spring, early summer is the biggest period for cheap strawberries, but and I missed out completely last year. So it just happens when I go, depends on, the geese are having an argument. It depends on when I go as to what I can get access to, and that's one of the pains of not going often enough, and it's a little too far away to go just to do a fruit and veg run. Like I could keep in contact with Adam and sort of decide to go down just for a bulk fruit or veg run, but you're talking 3.5 hours each way just to do that, and I don't know whether that's really a good idea either, especially in summer when I don't have a refrigerated chuck and things like that. So I don't know, but anyway, that's it for this one, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.